Hey there, night owls. I'm Nova, and you've just clocked into another episode of Night Shift Stories, where what happens under the buzz of hospital lights doesn't always stay on the chart. Some of these stories are inspired by real events, others are pure fiction, but every one of them will leave you questioning the people in the white coats. Viewer discretion is advised. Things get unsettling fast, so dim the lights, get comfortable, and remember, not everything that happens on the night shift makes it to the morning report. The stone house stood on the edge of the village, framed by creeping ivy and moss that clung to its ancient walls. The cobblestone path leading to the heavy wooden door was uneven, worn smooth by years of footsteps. A weathered sign hung above the entryway reading, Alexander Graves, Apothecary. Inside the front room was a simple sitting area with a few chairs, a worn rug, and a soft flame from the fireplace. Tucked away behind a narrow hallway was the apothecary lab. The air was heavy with the scent of herbs, mixture of lavender, horsetail, and snake roots hung at the back of the throat. Glass bottles and jars lined the shelves. The work table in the middle of the room was covered in knife marks. Candles, some tall and some nearly melted, were spread across it. A mouse ran across the floor, and Alexander tossed it a crumb before placing his doctor's bag by the door. As he struck a match to light a candle, he thought about a time before this, before the solitude, before Clementine. He was a boy again for a moment, standing in his father's shadow. The elder Graves had traveled around the countryside with his worn satchel, healing the sick and earning praise wherever he went. "Your father is a savior," his mother often said with a longing smile. But Alexander had only seen the man's absence. The years he spent watching his mother handle everything alone while his father was away left him with a determination that burned brighter than any candle in this room. To surpass his father, to be better, to be here. His failure with Clementine destroyed his life. He dreamed of achieving the greatness his father left behind, but the lifeless body of the woman he tried to save haunted every corner of his mind and every corner of this room. The first time Alexander laid eyes on Clementine, the world seemed brighter. She was the niece of the baker, visiting after a devastating illness had taken many lives in her village. Clementine had a smile as bright as the wildflowers she wove into her hair. Alexander had been delivering remedies to the baker's home when their paths crossed. She greeted him at the door, her large amber eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. "You must be the village doctor," she said, as she pointed to the black bag in his hand. Alexander was now suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance after a long day of tending to the sick. But she didn't seem to notice, or perhaps she didn't care. She invited him in, offering a cup of tea, a bowl of stew, and great conversation. Over the following weeks, they continued to meet up, first by chance and then by design. Clementine would stroll through the village square, stopping by Alexander's home, wanting a tincture for a minor ailment or advice on herbs to use in her cooking. They began spending time together, walking through the woods, sharing stories, and laughing in a way that felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Alexander often consumed himself with work, so he looked forward to these moments. Clementine had a way of grounding him, of reminding him of the beauty in the mundane. It wasn't long before their companionship deepened into something more. Alexander found himself captivated by her beauty, resilience, and compassion. Clementine, in turn, seemed to admire his dedication to his craft, even as she teased him for being too serious. They talked about the future, Clementine's desire to open a small shop of her own, Alexander's dreams of revolutionizing medicine and earning the admiration of not just his village, but the world. But their happiness was short-lived. Though she had shown no symptoms when she arrived, it became clear she hadn't escaped from the sickness that devastated her hometown. She fell ill. The bright spark she once carried had faded, replaced by a quiet, fragile sadness that shook Alexander to his core. Determined to save her, he insisted she move into his home where he could care for her without risking the health of her aunt and the other villagers. She didn't want to burden him, but he was firm. "You're not a burden, you're my everything." The apothecary became his sanctuary. He read all his father's old journals, seeking inspiration from the man he had sworn to surpass. Day and night, he boiled herbs and crushed powders to craft a tincture to cure her. For a while, it seemed his efforts were paying off. Clementine's color and strength returned. She laughed again. Her voice filled the home with a warmth he had feared losing. The villagers applauded Alexander's brilliance and the miracle he had performed. He succeeded, not just as a healer, but as a man worthy of love and adoration. But the sickness was unstoppable. One cold morning, he found her struggling to breathe, fever raging. Despite his best efforts, she slipped away that night. Her hand in his, her final words were a faint whisper. "My heart is always yours, Alexander." He was left shattered, his home a tomb of unfulfilled promises. He failed Clementine, and he failed himself. He preserved her body, unable to let go of the woman who had shown him a glimpse of the beautiful life he had always dreamed of. Deep within his apothecary, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the memories of his failure, his work began. Not to save lives, but to bring back the one life that had mattered the most. He rationed his time, balancing his duties as a village pharmacist and doctor with his secret nightly experiments. Villagers continued to seek him for remedies and advice, still unaware of Clementine's passing. "She's improving," he would lie. He would race to return home, where Clementine's still lifeless body awaited him. The deeper Alexander fell into his obsession, his methodical workspace turned into chaos. Glass vials of tinctures piled high on shelves, and his notes thrown on the floor as he choked on the smell of burnt herbs. He convinced himself his next discovery would be the breakthrough he needed to bring Clementine back. He spoke to her as though she could hear him. "Just a bit longer," he whispered one evening as he poured a green glowing mixture into a vial. Clementine's body began to betray him, slowly, painfully. First, there were subtle changes in her skin, then a terrible scent of rot that could not even escape the windows he nailed shut. Delicate skin stretched thin over her bones. Her body was stiff and bloated. Yet he refused to acknowledge what happened. He kept the room dark and covered her in layers of blankets to hide the worst. She had been improving, he insisted to anyone who asked. The decay, the smell, were nothing more than temporary setbacks in his quest to restore her to life. And so, he continued mixing and grinding herbs into powders, convinced that the medicine will work in time. He clung to the hope that his failure was not final. It was just a matter of finding the right combination, the right formula. She would return. The rumors had already begun to swirl around the village. No one had seen Clementine leave. While Alexander claimed that she returned to her village to recover, there were too many questions and not enough answers. But when Clementine's aunt, Miss Waverly, arrived unexpectedly one afternoon, Alexander knew that his fragile web of lies was about to unravel. "I came to check on Clem. I have heard nothing from her in weeks. I wanted to make sure she's well. She's gone back. A sudden need to return home. You understand. She's much better now." But she wasn't convinced. She stood in the doorway, her eyes darting toward the back of the house. I wanted to see for myself, to make sure." "Of course." She insisted that she didn't want to trouble you. Alexander moved to block her view into the house. As she turned to leave, Alexander quickly closed the door and fell to the ground with tears. Her intuition screamed at her. Something was wrong. She tiptoed to the back window, noticing the nails holding it shut. She was nervous, but picked up a small rock. With one swift motion, she hurled the rock through the glass. The instant the window shattered, the stench of death poured out like a vile cloud, thick and suffocating. The smell of decayed flesh hit her so hard it made her stomach turn, and she fell back, gagging as her knees gave out. She knew that Clementine was gone. Stumbling to her feet, she ran home. In the quiet of her room, Mrs. Waverly collapsed onto the bed, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. She knew her niece was dead. The shock and grief broke her heart as she slept, her last sleep, where the burden of the truth would die with her. A decade had passed since Clementine's death. Each year, without fail, Alexander honored the tradition of her birthday. There was always a celebration, no matter how small. He slowly got up from the chair, her usual spot at the table, and walked to the back room. The floorboards creaked as he entered the small, dimly lit room where Clementine's preserved skeleton lay. Her skin was dark and tough like leather. Her bones were as intact as the day he had first laid her to rest. He reached for the old saw, its blades worn but reliable. The sound of the metal scraping against bone was familiar, but it carried heaviness this time. He carefully sawed through the last of Clementine's remaining fingers. Number 10. Her last pinky finger was about to be transformed into something sacred yet grotesque. Each year, he dipped the severed finger into hot beeswax, watching as the wax slowly hardened onto the bone, sealing it in. He repeated the ritual this year, dipping the last finger into the melting wax with the same reverence he had shown all the others. The wax dripped down, coating the bony knuckles. When the process was complete, he placed the candle, now a twisted mockery of life, in the center of the table between two bowls of stew. One was for him, the other a tribute to her. Alexander lit the finger candle with a match, the flickering flame casting shadows on the wall. The shadows flashed images of him and Clementine walking through the woods as he picked a wild flower and placed it in her hair. The wax continued to drip, running down the knuckles. As the light flickered in the dark room, he ate his stew. His eyes never left the candle's show on the wall, feeling that in some way she was still there with him. Over the years, he managed to cure many patients, except those whose illness matched Clementine's. He experimented with new tinctures, but this mysterious plague continued to run rampant. His near successes, the patients who almost recovered but ultimately died, irritated his soul. As he sat there watching the candle burn, melting the wax from the bone, he realized the missing ingredient. The final piece of the puzzle had been buried with Clementine all along. Alexander snatched the finger candle from the table and ran toward the apothecary room. He ground the last of Clementine's finger with a mortar and pestle. "Oh, we've done it now, Clementine," he said, as he stirred the bone powder with his latest version of the tincture, staring at the bubbling concoction, wondering if this would be the cure he had always promised her. The morning was cold. As Alexander walked through the village, a glass vial in hand, frost crunching under his boots. He reached a small cottage where a worried mother begged, "Please do something." Inside, her son lay still, barely breathing, the sight reminding him of Clementine in her final days. Kneeling beside the boy, he uncorked the tincture. He tipped the vial to his lips, watching as the liquid slipped into his mouth. Alexander sat and waited for hours, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Then, as if by divine intervention, the boy moved. He sat up slowly, his weak voice calling for his mother. Tears streamed down his mother's face as she hugged the child. Alexander was stunned. The cure had worked. After a decade of failure, of sacrifice, of descending into madness, he had done it. Clementine's death had not been in vain. He had saved a life, and perhaps he could save more. By the following day, the news had spread like wildfire. Villagers crowded outside Alexander's door, parents carrying sick children, elders begging for the cure, forcing bags of coins into his hands as he stood in the doorway. He returned to his apothecary with the villagers' hopes and the tempting chance to finally be a savior, not just his father's son. The tincture worked, but its potency came from the final ingredient, Clementine herself. As he prepared a fresh batch, he hesitated. To make more, he would need to use what remained of her skeleton. The logic was clear. The disease could only be cured by the bones of one who had died from it. With a heavy heart, he ground another fragment of her bone into a fine powder, whispering apologies to Clementine as he worked. "You saved them once, my love, and you will again." The door rattled as the villagers outside grew more demanding. Alexander pushed the guilt aside, sealed the new vials, and handed them to the desperate. Each vial drained his dwindling supply of Clementine's remains as he edged closer to the truth being uncovered. The discovery came by surprise. A local woman came to get more of the special medicine and noticed strange pieces on Alexander's table, an old piece of cloth and what looked like a bone. As she realized what they were, her heart sank. The cure that had brought hope was made from something terrible. Word spread quickly in the small village. Soon, a crowd gathered at his door, holding torches and shouting. Alexander stood in his doorway as the mob demanded answers. "I did what I had to do. Clementine was my muse, my reason. I loved her and never meant to harm her. I only wanted to save others, to finish what I started with her." But his words fell on deaf ears. The villagers pushed forward, storming into his home. They tore through, ripping open cabinets and shattering vials of medicine. It didn't take long to uncover the horrifying truth. Clementine's remains were laid on the apothecary table. Mothers covered their children's eyes. Men wanted retribution. Alexander stood frozen, trapped in the center of the storm. He thought of the little girl who now laughed and played. The cure was real. It worked. He thought of Clementine, her smile and warmth, and the joy she brought into this world. He could destroy the evidence, her remains, the tinctures, the notes, and take his dignity to the grave. Or he could present his findings to the villagers, revealing the horrific acts he committed to save lives. Alexander grabbed Clementine's fragile skeletal remains from the table, holding them close to his chest. His journal dangled in his other hand, pages spilling secrets of his decade-long crusade onto the floor. The angry crowd closed in. Alexander grabbed a torch from one of them and backed away with panic in his eyes. He ran into the back room and slammed the door. As they chased him, he pushed a heavy cabinet in front of the door to keep them out. With the dim glow of the torch, he found Clementine's old tattered dress and pressed it against his face as though it still carried her scent. Then he lowered the torch to the floor. The fire roared to life, casting flickering shadows on the wall as Alexander crouched in the center of the room, hugging the dress and her remains. As the flames rose, Alexander watched the shadows. He and Clementine holding hands as they walked through the woods, their shapes merging as the fire consumed it all. Outside, fists pounded against the door. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Oh, we've done it now, Clementine." Thanks for keeping me company through another long night. I'm Nova, and I hope these stories made you think, maybe even feel a little less alone in the dark. I'll be here next time. Same shift, same quiet hour. Until then, take care of yourself and rest easy.